Hello, good evening, and welcome, or good morning, or good afternoon, no matter where you are in the world, to episode 133 of the NOTCAST. Today, I am going to be talking about David Bowie's third record, The Man Who Sold the World. Here is one of the many editions of the album that have been released. As previously mentioned, when talking about David Bowie, this was released before I was born. So everything I'm talking about with this is me reading it in books and learning about it secondhand after the fact, and I have to be fairly open about that. I think this is not David Bowie's best album, but it's certainly a considerable leap on from the 1967 debut, from the 1969 Space Oddity album, as it is now known. And this is also the latest point that the David Bowie estate is at, with the 50th anniversary copyright extension, legacy reissues, and box sets. I have a strange relationship with this album, because it feels to me almost like David Bowie is a passenger on this record, and that's kind of reflected in some of the anecdotes during the recording of the album in summer 1970, where Tony Visconti, Mick Ronson, who makes his first appearance on a Bowie album, as does Mick Woodmansey on here on drums as well. So effectively, he's almost got the full lineup of the Spiders, actually. Just Tony Visconti on bass, actually, and eventually that would change, and then the Spiders from Mars will be there. So this is 3/4 of the Spiders, which is pretty exciting. You can definitely see a change and a leap forward. The debut obviously was to me at least, an album that was written by somebody that didn't have enough life experience. Space Oddity was written from a slightly different perspective. Somebody who maybe experienced a little bit more, but hadn't seen and touched and tasted all of life. By the time that David was recording The Man Who Sold the World, he just got married, and he was far keener on living a life of married bliss with Angie that didn't quite last, as opposed to making records. Now, I perhaps am a little bit different from a lot of people. If someone said to me, even now I had the opportunity to make a studio album, even if I've made 20 previous studio albums, I would not be a passenger in that. I'd be, if it's my name on the cover, I'm going to make damn sure it's something I'm going to be proud of. I'm going to make sure that all the songs are written before I go into the studio. They're going to be damn good songs. I'm going to know what the hell I'm doing, and I'm going to be prepared. David Bowie didn't necessarily take that approach with this album. Of course, this is not the original cover, because the album came in three different covers, actually. So the first version of it came with this cover here. This is from the Rykodisc 1990 edition, and then the second cover here. Then between 1973 and 1990, the standard cover for The Man Who Sold the World was this one, which is a not contemporary, taken 2 years later after the release of the album, photograph of Bowie in his Ziggy period. I wish bands wouldn't change the covers of albums, unless the cover of the album is something terrible, like Scorpion's Virgin Killer, for example, or maybe actually Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction is pretty naff, isn't it? And every Poison album has a terrible cover as well. Unless the album cover is abjectly and obviously terrible and tasteless right from the off, you shouldn't be changing the covers of the albums. At least that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. So The Man Who Sold the World was released in November 1970 in the US, and April 1971 in the UK. And it had sold, by June 1971, this had sold 1,395 copies in the US, so not exactly setting the world on fire. And the initial copies of it came with the illustration which I showed you previously, which was drawn by one of Bowie's local artists' friends, whose name I have temporarily forgotten because I forgot to look it up, which is here. The Man Who Sold the World. This has now become the de facto and default cover for the 50th anniversary remix of the album. Now, this is an illustration of Cane Hill Hospital in Croydon. And Cane Hill Hospital was a Victorian asylum, effectively for people with mental health conditions. In fact, it's maybe about 10 minutes walk away, or it was 10 minutes walk away from West Croydon train station. I used to commute into West Croydon train station 20 years ago. I'm showing my age here. And sometimes when I'd miss the train, I used to walk a bit further down and kind of go, well, what's down here? And you know, then there'd be this huge abandoned Victorian hospital, which later caught fire and was demolished and now rebuilt. And now, like everything, as soon as something is demolished, it's replaced with luxury urban apartments for exciting inner city living. Whereas at the time it was a scary, spooky old hospital. So it's pretty weird to think that, you know, I walked past this building, which was on the front of a David Bowie album, on a very regular basis, and I had no idea of its history. I just looked at it and thought, well, that building looks pretty scary, which it entirely was. There was also another couple of covers. As I've mentioned, there's the dress cover here, which was the UK default. Germany got this cover, for some reason, a flying David Bowie with huge wings, and obviously there's this cover with the kicking sleeve on there as well. Now, the theme of madness, I think, runs all the way through the album, and it cannot be overstated just how important that theme is, actually, not only to this album but to all of David Bowie's works. You listen to all of his songs, even right towards the end of his career, songs like Jump, They Say, No Control, I'm Deranged. There was always a song that was about, you know, the gap between Reality, which again was the name of one of his albums, and what the perception of reality was, whether you were inside or outside of reality. It was a theme that he came back to time and time again in all the lyrics to many of the songs, and the theme is there in everything. And I think this is because mental health was pretty abundant in David's family. 3 of his aunts had either breakdowns or schizophrenia or, you know, some other form of mental health issue. His brother Terry, his half brother on his mother's side, Terry, who he was quite close to, was really unwell, suffered from depression, I think committed suicide later on, and it's a theme that he returns to again and again in his albums. You can't really understand, I think, the David Bowie lyrics unless you also understand a little bit of that context. Is that, you know, to an extent, he may very well have thought, well, am I mad? How can I trust the perceptions that I have? How can I trust the nerves that I've got in my brain that are telling me that things are the right way round, and up is up and down is down, and that, you know, when I touch something, that it's real? And how do I know that's not just a collective consensus reality or a hallucinogenic hallucination, you know, a false reality that's not really real? You know, and obviously sometimes people look in the mirror and who they see is not who they really are, and that could be seen almost as a, you know, a degree of madness, confidence, anxiety, and so on and so forth. So all these things are deep inside the DNA of this album, in a way that perhaps not many of the Bowie albums are. So I'm going to go through the record, then we're going to go through the various reissues, singles, and other bits and bobs that kind of came out at roughly the same time. Now, before the album was released, there was a single, and let me see if I can find a copy of it here. There was a recording of The Prettiest Star. Now, this isn't The Prettiest Star, this is a reissue with Prettiest Star on the B-side, from 1973. This one is the coloured vinyl version that was sold at the Brooklyn Museum in New York in, I think, 2018. Exclusive silver vinyl, record collectors. But Prettiest Star sits alongside the other songs from the album. It's part of the period, and you don't really get a full kind of understanding of the album without knowing all the bits that went in and all the bits that went out. So the first song on the album is called The Width of a Circle. And The Width of a Circle is something that we'll come back to later on when we get to the reissues. It's an 8.5 minute roaring rampage of rock and roll. Effectively, Tony and Mick, and later on Woody, kind of built this song, built like a lot of the songs, is they built the instrumental versions on the basis of skeletal demos and kind of worked up the songs, created their own demos, riffs, ideas, arrangements, and effectively kind of laid the tapestry for David to then add his vocals. And you can hear some of the embryonic versions of the songs on the Bowie at the Beeb double CD from the year 2000, which features, amongst other things, The Width of a Circle, and there's a couple of rare tracks as well, Looking for a Friend and Almost Grown, that's on there, but we'll get to that later. So Width of a Circle is the first song. It's 8.5 minutes. It's a banger. I don't like to use that word too often, but it's a big epic track. It really kind of kicks off the album very, very clearly. Sets out its stall and goes, this is not the David Bowie you used to know. So all of the vestiges of the the Faye, the sensitive, the acoustic singer-songwriter version of David Bowie are kind of being pushed to one side in the favour of this confident, assertive rock that actually doesn't deserve to be this confident, given how late in the day some of the lyrics and the vocals were laid down. And then the second song on it is All the Madmen, which David played live briefly in 1971. He returned to it for the disastrously poor taste Glass Spider tour in 1987, and then never played it again after that. And there's a lyric in here which goes, day after day they take some brain away, they turn my face around to the far side of town, and they tell me that it's real and ask me how I feel. Here I stand, foot in hand, talking to my wall. I'm not quite right at all. Give me some good old lobotomy. Now, as I've mentioned before, David singing and writing about madness and depression and anxiety and schizophrenia and the fact that you can't trust your own brain to be on your side. These are all kind of deeply ingrained into the album. As we get to the title track, it becomes far, far more apparent as we go along. All the Madmen is a great song. However, Black Country Rock, side 3, is shit. Absolute shit. It's awful. It's a 3-minute kind of T-Rexy, will this do, B-side type of thing. It's very simplistic, basic, banal. It's not even stupid in a smart way, it's just stupid in a stupid way, and it's got some pretty rubbish lyrics. It really feels like album filler. It shouldn't be track 3 on an album. It shouldn't even be on your album, I'm afraid to say. Now, the next song is After All, which has the perhaps terrible chorus of Oh by Jingo. Can't say I'm a huge fan of it at all. Now, this sounds like I'm being unnecessarily harsh to the man who sold the world, but even on his third album, some of the songs that he's writing and sticking on the album are not particularly good. Side A is by no means the best side of any David Bowie record ever. Side B is a little stronger. It's got Running Gun Blues, which again is somewhat forgettable, to be honest. Saviour Machines, She Shook Me Cold, The Man Who Sold the World, and The Supermen. The second side is definitely better than the first side. Let's take to one side the fact that Width of the Circle is great, but the rest of side A is not that great. Saviour Machines, I think, ties into a theme which Bowie would repeat and revisit again and again, both on stage, on disc, and on film, which is around computers, technology, and how machines are going to save us all. For Diamond Dogs in 1974, David was working on putting together a stage show adaptation of 1984. And then started creating his own science fiction timelines. He starred in The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is a fantastic movie. He came back to it again when he was doing the Nathan Adler period, around about Outside, which is all around being packet sniffers and on the internets and all that stuff. So he was always obsessed with technology and the way that technology transforms the human experience. And Saviour Machine probably kind of picks up the same thing, although by the look of it, there is a typo on my LP calling it Saviour Machines, which probably makes it either rare or just sloppy attention to detail. Not quite sure. She Shook Me Cold. I don't remember this song at all. I've listened to the LP 3 or 4 times in the past week or two, and I do not remember that song in the slightest. But then we get to The Man Who Sold the World, the title track, and a song that most people generally had forgotten was a David Bowie song until Nirvana covered it for the MTV Unplugged session in 1994. Now, I'm a huge fan of the track. I think it's the strongest song on the album, with the possible exception of Width of the Circle. And it seems to have been, in retrospect, kind of taken on board and adopted as a David Bowie classic, although most people at the time weren't really paying a huge amount of attention. Not really paying a huge amount of attention to the song. Sorry, guys, long day. And that's probably where I think it's the best song on the album, actually, unsurprisingly. And that's not because Nirvana covered it; it's because it is the best song on the album. So the lyric to "Man Who Sold the World," I think, is really, really pivotal to the rest of the album. It's a fractured lyric. It doesn't really make full sense. It's kind of impressionistic, but the opening line is, "We passed upon the stair, we spoke of where and when, and although I wasn't there, he said I was his friend." Um, the idea being that he met somebody who wasn't there, who wasn't really there at all, and that it comes to the theme of madness, which is in the album. The idea that when you're going through a particularly tough time in your life, you tell people, "Well, I'm not really here. This isn't happening," to quote Radiohead's "How to Disappear Completely." But also the idea of when, if you've seen the documentary around the making of Apocalypse Now, Hearts of Darkness, there are bits where literally the cast are talking to each other and going, "I'm not really here, Francis. I'm on a beach in Hawaii drinking pina coladas and everything is fine. I am not stuck in Vietnam making this movie at all." The Man Who Sold the World is about meeting somebody who's ostensibly famous but you don't really connect with that person. The person is there, they're in front of you, but they're absent, they're somewhere else, they're thinking about something else. They gazed a gazely stare, and it's not about that. And it says, "You're face to face with the man who sold the world." And to me, that lyric about the man who sold the world, the idea being is, I had the world and I sold it, as if somehow, firstly, everything is for sale and everything can be bought, and secondly, is they sold their world, they sold the world to them, and they somehow betrayed ideas, ethics, morality, or whatever in return for money. And what some people can't fully grasp ever is that there is more to life than just being really fucking rich. Sorry, guys, I swore. But there is. People will offer huge amounts of money to people and think that that will solve the problem. And it's actually, no, I won't do it because I don't want to do it, because it doesn't feel like who I am. There are certain people, certain places, certain jobs that no matter how much money you offered me, I would not do that, because there is more to life than money. And having a clear conscience and an easy and a clear conscience and a light heart is worth a lot. Actually, there are lots of things that if you were offered lots of money, you go, "Well, do I really want to do that, even though there's money?" And so the Man Who Sold the World is to an extent about the price that people put upon their values, um, and what that's worth to them. Great song, absolutely great song, but I think I've told you that anyway. And then the last one is the Supermen, tying in with the idea of the Ubermensch, which is the just a concept of are we the new gods now? I think The Man Who Sold the World is a great LP. I know I've said it's not my favourite David Bowie LP. I should say that compared to pretty much everybody else's work, a fairly okay David Bowie LP is still a lot better than pretty much everybody else's entire work stuck together. There is more artistic value in the space between the songs than there is in the entire career of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And if you want to take me to court, please don't. It's only an opinion. It's not worth that much. Now, this version of the album here with the kit cover, this is the UK cover that it had between 1972 and before the Rykodisc reissues in 1990, which standardised and restored the original cover. This version here has a sticker on it on the back. It has a barcode, so I'm guessing it's 1981, 82 or thereabouts. It's a black label. Now that means it's an RCA International edition, which means it's probably sometime mid-late 80s maybe. Not that it really matters. As far as I was concerned, at the time I got into David Bowie, I mean properly into David Bowie, I got into him in 1995, and then about 2001, 2002, I really went for it, actually. Everyone was selling off their old LPs. So you could pick these David Bowie albums up off eBay. I think this one was like £3. But yeah, people were literally giving their vinyl away at that point. So The Man Who Sold the World as an album has had a couple of interesting things that happened to it. It was reissued in 1990 as part of the catalogue Rykodisc reissue program that tied in with the Sound and Vision box set and tour. So the Rykodisc version of this, I've got a version with a deletion cut in here, but I will not complaining. The Rykodisc version folds out into a poster. So the poster has the original cover there with Cane Hill Memorial Hospital on, and also the kit cover and the weird Cyclops Flying Beastie version, and it's got a scan of the picture disc, the A and the B, I think, on there, and then it's also got the lyrics on here alongside some photographs from the period. It's also got some bonus tracks. So the bonus tracks on the Rykodisc version, and I should point out, all the Rykodisc versions of the David Bowie albums are now deleted. They've been reissued without the bonus tracks. So the bonus tracks that are on the Rykodiscs are often not available anywhere else. The bonus tracks on this are a song called Lightning Frightening, and the A-side single version of Holy Holy, alongside the Arnold Corn singles of the first A and B side of the first Arnold Corn single, Moon Age Daydream and Hang On To Yourself. And these are all songs worth mentioning, by the way. So Lightning Frightening had not hair nor hound of a kind of like a rumour that the song existed until it was issued. Holy Holy was an inter-album single, and in those days artists kind of thought they needed to provide value for money, and so every single would be, or most singles would be, a new track, not something that had been on the LP before. And then David was trying to get another group off the ground. He was thinking about maybe becoming, the backseat vocalist, stroke singer, stroke producer, stroke General Svengali behind another act called the Arnold Corns, who released one single called Moon Age Daydream, a very early version of that, backed with Hang On To Yourself. Both of those songs appear later on, and also another kind of single which later saw release in the Netherlands in the mid-80s called Man in the Middle, and we'll talk about that one later. The versions of Moon Age Daydream and Hang On To Yourself are pretty primitive. They're certainly not as exciting, as vibrant, or anywhere near as I think oomphier is the word, perhaps as the other ones. But they're good bonus tracks to have. But there was lots and lots of stuff in the Bowie catalogue that wasn't yet released at that point. Now, there was the Sound and Vision box set, which came out in 1990. Here it is. And Sound and Vision saw the release of the single version of The Prettiest Star on CD for the first time, I think, and a version of London by Tata, as well as Black Country Rock and The Man Who Sold the World. This box set will be coming out frequently over the next few episodes, and I'll be opening it up more and more as we get further and further into the track list and we go through the unreleased stuff that's on there, because between this and the Rykodisc issues there are some fantastic bonus tracks which sadly seem to have fallen out of circulation. Now, in the year 2000, Bowie at the Beeb was released. This is a double CD of David Bowie's radio sessions, the best of his radio sessions between 1968 and 1970. And let's open this up, because actually most of the stuff that's on here has seen release elsewhere. So we've got a version of the 1970 session, but we also have a John Peel session here that was recorded on the 3rd of June 1971. And the 3rd of June session, I think, had Bombers, Looking for a Friend, the only version of Chuck Berry's Almost Grown, and Kooks. And those are on this box set, which are those are kind of like post Man Who Sold the World radio sessions. Now we get into reissue territory, so let's start off with the knowledge that sadly David Bowie is not a Highlander and therefore died. On the 5 years box set, here's the CD edition. Let's open it up. The Man Who Sold the World got released in a card sleeve here, a reproduction version of it, and also there was a second disc called Recall, or there was a compilation disc called Recall. Recall contains the single A and B sides of Holy Holy, Moon Age Daydream, Hang On To Yourself, an edit of All the Madmen, and a track called Janine. Now, this year, or more correctly last year, saw the 50th anniversary edition release of the Metrobolist, which is the original title for The Man Who Sold the World before David had written the song, which has been reissued with the same track listing and running order, but replicates the art from the first version of The Man Who Sold the World. So there's the picture of the Cane Hill Hospital. There's a gatefold sleeve. It basically replicates the cover and feel of it. And then it contains inside a 50th anniversary Tony Visconti remix of the album. I must be honest, I do not know why these albums are getting 50th anniversary remixes. I suspect it is because that way they can claim that it is a new version of the album and they can extend the copyright on there. So the Metrobolist, as it is, what we've probably found actually is that there should be like a glorious 4-disc version of The Man Who Sold the World, but it's been split up amongst several of the releases. So it's been split up amongst The Man Who Sold the World, the Metrobolist remix, and then this compilation, which was released earlier this year, The Width of a Circle. This is a really, really great, important, essential David Bowie compilation. The first disc is the John Peel Show radio session in February 1970, which is an hour-long concert. The version of the concert on this is taken from Tony Visconti's personal off-air recording from a cassette tape. So it's a cassette tape recording in mono from 1970. It sounds exactly what it is. The BBC, as we know, weren't always very good at keeping the tapes from the era because they were always needed to wipe episodes of Doctor Who for sport. And then the second disc of this features the soundtrack to a TV show which David appeared in called The Looking Glass Murders, some various mixes of the singles The Prettiest Star, Memory of a Free Festival, Holy Holy, the Andy Ferris radio session in March 1970, and Tony Visconti remixes as well. So it's a lovely package, by the way, I should point out. It's considerably less awful than some of the other reissue packages. It's also considerably better value for money, because this is £20 as opposed to £75. And very little on this has actually been released before, whereas a £75 box set of Conversation Piece contains approximately 83% previously released material. But I do recommend getting The Width of a Circle, aside from the fact that disc 1 is a little hissy because it was recorded, I think, off AM radio. It's pretty good. If you were quick off the draw and you went to the David Bowie website, you could order this 10-inch single, The Width of a Circle, which is the only vinyl edition of Width of the Circle that came out. This features Tony's remixes of The Prettiest Star, London by Tartar, the single version of Memory of a Free Festival, and the original single version of Holy Holy, all freshly mixed in 2020 by Tony Visconti. Although, as I've said before, that really only exists for copyright extension purposes, which feels a little cheeky. That brings David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World to a close. I've kind of raced through that because, to me, The Man Who Sold the World is a historical artifact. It's not an album that I've listened to it recently. I listen to it very regularly, at least once a year, and it's an album that's never grown to me. I've never grown to it. I think the thing with David Bowie is because he had many different phases and many different approaches and many different styles, is that there are parts of his career that I feel more closely attuned to than others. The early stuff, up to Diamond Dogs, I know lots of people think that is where it's at, but for me that's a phase of David Bowie that I appreciate but I don't adore, which is slightly important. Again, when I talk through all of his other albums, my relationship with those albums will change as to how good I think they are. To me, this is a pretty good early 70s, fairly standard rock LP. But you can see that he's very, very good at what he does, and he will get better at what he does over time. And you can already see with The Man Who Sold the World, And the Supermen, I think that the songwriting is already starting to take a leap, but it's becoming better and better over time. Some people think that when a band releases its first album, that's where it's at. That's the good stuff, the first album. Everything else, piece of crap. But it isn't, because I think actually some people grow into who they are. And certainly with David, it took him a few albums before he became incredible. He was really, really good from the second album onwards, but he just got better and better. And by the way, I should point out, I think Black Star is maybe his best album. To think that you're making your best album in your late 60s, that's quite an achievement. Not many people get to do that. Not even Leonard Cohen got to do that. So there you go. Right, next episode, not quite sure what it's going to be. I have a post-it note over there that tells me what I'm going to be doing and in what order I'm going to be doing it. It's not going to be a new artist, it's going to be another album by somebody I've already talked about. But when I get to that, I'm sure you'll hear all about it. As per normal, if you've got comments or want to say lovely things, go down there. I will post links to various YouTube playlists of various live recordings and so on and so forth, if there are any for this particular period. I think I have to sum up and go, well, The Man Who Sold the World is not my favourite David Bowie album. It's a good album, really good album. It's better than an album I could have made at his age, but it's not the best David Bowie album. That is yet to come, and it is not Tin Machine 2. Okay, short, sweet. Gonna wrap up here. Take care of yourselves, and I hopefully will see you all soon. Bye.